Minister, it has been brought to our attention that Starlink is actually operating in South Africa. And that being the case, it's operating illegally in this country. And I'll tell you why. There's an organization, a company called Icasa Sepush. I don't know if you're aware of a company called Icasa Sepush. That company, the landing page states the following. We are dedicated to bringing reliable internet to Africa with sparkling, and we know stars sparkle, technology and commitment to service. We're here to connect you wherever you are in South Africa. Stay connected, stay empowered, and unlock endless opportunity. Big. It is now operating in Mozambique, and it is selling equipment, satellite equipment, for Starlink connectivity. Now, our understanding, and by the way, this company is based in Centurion now. They have actually an office and a physical address. Now, what is also concerning, Minister, if you go to their website, there's a part there that speaks to working strategies to keep Starlink connected in South Africa. It says, despite Starlink not being officially licensed in South Africa, many users remain successfully connected through a combination of proven workarounds and reliable subscription plans. And it then goes on to say, based on our testing and feedback from the community and the strategies below, please find currently the most effective ways to keep your Starlink kit online and functioning without interruption. Now, Minister, this is happening right under your nose. We are busy talking, not even discussed in the first place. The other point, Minister, that I want to raise is that, this reminds me, especially if you look at the comments that were made by the owner of Starlink, where he said he will switch off Starlink, this wasn't for Ukraine, and it will end all the fronts of communication for the army. Now, if we give that kind of a person powers to connect our people, that alone is a huge risk for this country, because the sovereignty and the security of this country and the defense thereof will be in the hands of one person who can at a whim decide to switch off this country's communications. And as you know, if you go to war, maybe you don't know, there are three things you focus on. You switch off the water, you switch off electricity, and importantly, you switch off communication. Now, you want to give that kind of a person that's operating illegally in the country that kind of power? The other point is then takes me back to Radio RSG, which I see our members from the SAPC are. Radio Sandergrense. 1937 it was founded. And that was exactly that, a radio without borders. And was used by the apartheid government, by the way, to communicate. By the way, that radio station is the only radio station in the country where you can actually connect anywhere without any interruption of frequency. What I'm seeing here is this Starlink supposedly for farmers being another radio sondergrenze of apartheid model, which can be used and to achieve certain agendas. As you know, we have issues of racism and the issues of farmers that have been raised in this country. What I'm seeing here is another radio sondergrenze of apartheid regime, which is going to be used for whatever purposes that they want to use it for, which we know will not be in the favor of this country. So, Minister, what are you going to do about that? How can...
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and to the Minister and to the Department for the presentation and for the spirited contributions from Honorable Subrati and other members of the committee. My concern is that it seems like the Minister is trying to amend legislation using a ministerial policy directive. And I'll tell you why. Because you use the word alignment, and I think you do it deliberately instead of amendment. So I think you're trying to effect amendments using a ministerial policy directive to the Electronic Communications Act as well as to the ICT Sector Code, which is a product of the BBBE Act. Because in your policy directive communication, you say that you seek to align the two. I'm interested as to what would the consequence of that alignment look like? How do you achieve alignment outside of changing legislation? Because the ICT Sector Code, as much as it might be a regulatory instrument under the Department of Communications, it's a product of the BBBE Act. And to give a ministerial directive on the ICT Sector Code, which belongs to that specific act, which is regulated by the Department of Trade and Industry, confuses me. On the Electronic Communications Act, which speaks to the 30% ownership as well, I would imagine that an amendment of that or an alignment of that with the ICT Sector Code would require some level of amendment to either both pieces of legislation or one. One doesn't belong to the Department of Communications. It's a product of an act of the Department of Trade and Industry. The other is an act of Parliament. When you want to achieve this alignment, how do you seek to achieve it using a ministerial policy directive? And I think that speaks to the overstepping of powers or overstepping of executive powers that has been spoken to in the House. That is my primary legislative concern. But also conversely, I mean, we're talking about Starlink here. I don't think we should tiptoe around it. We're talking about Starlink. There might be many other foreign satellite companies that have interest in operating in South Africa, but there's a specific interest in Starlink, and I think Sipho will speak to the political context about that as well. But I'm interested in, has there any been consideration of the impact the introduction of foreign satellite companies operating in South Africa would have on the local telecommunications industry, specifically as it relates to jobs? Because there's a myth going around here that the introduction of Starlink will achieve two things, that it will achieve rural access to internet connectivity and as well will increase jobs. How will a satellite that will operate and be ran remotely from another country impact on the local telecommunications sector's jobs? And considering especially the high unemployment rate in this country. But secondly, what is the knowledge of the department on the costs related to the introduction of foreign satellite operators? Will it necessarily bring higher connectivity levels to rural communities? Will it be cheaper? Comparative to what? And has there been any consideration of the other spheres within which Starlink operates and the regulatory frameworks in the other countries that they operate, and whether they abided by them as set in stone? Because we are aware that they are operating in India with much stricter ownership regulatory existence in terms of local ownership there. We know there's been a challenge in Taiwan, in Japan. Why are we altering our legislation for Starlink, whereas where it goes to operate in other countries, it did not utilize this coercion for us to change our laws in order for it to operate in South Africa? So I'm interested in the legislative aspect of it, and I think we'll talk further after we get clarity on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Tambo. Good morning, Chairperson and colleagues. Good morning, Minister. Minister, does it not bother you that this will lead to endless legal battles? Because I can assure you that as the EFF, we are going to challenge this unconstitutional proposal, not only in Parliament, but we'll make sure that we explore all legal mechanisms, because we are not about to accept a situation where our laws are rewritten in Washington. I'm wondering, Minister, if it really does not bother you that you are setting a wrong precedence of bending backwards when you are being bullied. Because we can't, like we've said with my colleagues, that this is about Starlink. this is about Washington. So now we have a bunch of bullies bullying you, and you are bending backwards for them. And then you make it seem like this has been in process. I don't think this has been in process, because I think if that was the case, this committee would be aware that this has been in process. But like my colleagues have been saying, that this is an issue we heard about in the media. I'm wondering if maybe it doesn't bother you that you're making us look weak, that when racists are throwing toys, right, and are hating on black people in our country, and you are giving them what they want. Because this started when the government of this country signed an act, the Land Expropriation Act, into a bill, and they started spreading these lies and disinformation about us. So clearly these are people who hate the laws of this country. Why would a billionaire have a problem of 30% black ownership? This is a billionaire who is not belonging in this country and doesn't want people of this country to own anything. Does it not bother you that you are taking people who hate black people and you want them to operate in this country and they're not even contributing anything? There are not going to be jobs that are created here. They don't want ownership of black people. They don't want black people to own land. They don't want black people to own anything. These are the people who see the majority of the people in this country as nothing. And it doesn't bother you that these are the people you want to operate in this country for free.